there's this moment, it was funny, but my wife came down in the middle of the night, and I had a smart app for lighting. I was always experimenting with crap in our house. And she came down in underwear and like all the outside lights and all the inside turned on, like party mode. And she's like, this is stupid. Like, who needs smart lighting? No one. Definitely took me a while to recognize what types of problems are worth solving. What I mean by you should know in 18 months is you should see it. Like if the pattern is not starting to emerge, it's probably doing the boulder up the hill thing and the payoff's not there. This opportunity to make the world go from sort of deaf, dumb, and blind to, sort of awakened in a sense, and all the positive and negative implications of that, but where you can bring intelligence into these physical spaces. And in the case of Bright, all the critical infrastructure that Western civilization relies on.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Listen, if you don't want the show to like move up the rankings, you don't want it to get better guests, totally get it. You know what? Don't leave a review. Just don't do it. Why would you? But if you want to help out, if you want better and better guests, if you want to help the show move up the rankings, then take literally 5 seconds and hit 5 stars. Thank you. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pablo. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, man. I mean, you've had such a long history with startups. You started, I think, 7 different startups. And the last one, the one before BrightAI, which you're working on today, Smart Things, was acquired for a rumored, I won't put you on the spot to confirm or deny, but for a rumored, $200 million or so. It was definitely, huge exit, very huge success. And, in the Internet of Things kind of space, no less, which, hardware is notoriously hard. I say that with firsthand experience because my startup was in the hardware space, in the IoT space, and we took a beating, man. We took a beating. So, I'm happy to share that story as we chat. But I guess let's start there. We'd love to learn a bit about kind of what was Smart Things. How did you get into that space? And I know it was a big that was part of the origins for BrightAI. So we'll kind of weave into that later.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, it definitely led, I'm sure everybody's like this, but I love learning, and sort of my life has been sort of this series of lessons, and you sort of try to get better in each one and, along the way. But as you said, I've built a bunch of different businesses over time and been lucky to have some really, really positive outcomes without going through to all the metrics, but, highly scaled outcomes that you dream about, and learned a ton along the way. And now in a place where I, love not just building businesses still, but helping other entrepreneurs and so on too. So I was really excited about the chance to have a conversation with you because of your network and audience and things. So so Smart Things, I had built a number of sort of cloud and SaaS companies before that. And honestly, I was getting sort of bored with the niche I was in. Like all of the entrepreneurial signals would be to keep going in the vein where I had, this existing experience and track record. And I'd never done anything in hardware before. And I'd had some other outcomes. And so I was in a space looking for what's become a really big life learning for me. Like you got to have a great team and all these other things, but you should solve the biggest problems you can go after. And I was yearning for bigger problems to solve. So Smart Things was born. I have our family, part of my extended family has a place in Colorado up in the mountains, and arrived one year to see it sort of really damaged by a freezing and flooding event, and have this sort of what the hell moment. Because, at that point, this in 2012, we had a Kindle, could download a book over the air. Kids were watching some, Dora the Explorer, something on some sort of device in the car. It was how is this physical space offline? And, just started tinkering. I hadn't been in the hardware space, but on the side, I was certainly ADT and some of those services weren't available up in the mountains. So that was the advantage of my situation there was kind of really, really remote.
What year was this?
2012. But I did have cellular signal out there. And I started tinkering on building a kind of connected sensor hub that I could put in the house just to have eyes on the house. And realized the sort of big aha moment for me was I had come from not a hardware background, and I think it's sometimes really useful to have, come from an outside space and look at something fresh. So having been in software development, I was like, how do I build the firmware for this thing? It's crazy. Okay, if everybody's building connected devices and IoT is maturing, how there's got to be, with your smartphone, you saw this a couple of years where it was just a phone, and then the App Store emerged and people were building apps, and I barely use my phone as a phone, anymore. It was like these connected spaces are going to be similar. And so the idea with Smart Things was, there's got to be a platform for physical applications. And most people don't know this, but the company was actually born as the Physical Graph Corporation was the name of the company. And super dorky, I think cool. But, the idea was like, okay, if the knowledge graph happened with Google in that way of like indexing the world's information, those are outdated now. But, the social graph was emerging because of like platforms like Facebook. There's going to be a physical graph where IoT enables the world to sort of be connected and then software to be written to make the world smarter. And you get the idea in Bright later, in this. But we had to solve a problem, like tell people what we're doing. And, like my neighbor's not going to sign up for Physical Graph Corporation, So we invented the brand Smart Things, put out a Kickstarter campaign about this open platform. Fun to go back and look at it sometimes now. And we just hit all the right things at the right time and, became a really big platform. So ramped it up. It's become, today it's 350 million households. It's 88 countries, more than 1 million events per second flow through the platform. Now it's just mind-boggling sort of scale. And it was an incredible learning experience that I can chat all day about. But, it was ultimately acquired by Samsung. There was a horse race with Google bought Nest, and there was a lot of the tech titans were like, okay, this IoT and smart home thing is going to happen. We should have a play in it. And we were a lot of things went right. And then I stayed on for a few years to run it. Just learning inside of Samsung is fascinating, and making sure that the platform sort of fulfilled the vision that I'd had for it. And that led to then Bright, which I can get into. But great experience, incredible team, worldwide problem, and all of that. So I'm very thankful for for it.
With Smart Things, my question is, as an outsider, like, I get the idea of building a product, of building a platform and allowing others to kind of build apps on top. I get that, like, high level, but what was like the V1 product? You mentioned the Kickstarter. Is this like something built on top of like a Raspberry Pi, or like where, do you know what I mean? Like, where do you fit into the stack?
My first one, I've actually got it over there. I could go grab it if you want. It's like an Arduino. It's like an unholy Arduino-based sensor hub. I've got it in some glass back there. And then, but once we did the Kickstarter, we recognized, we at least had to. There was nothing pretty early on that there's nothing off the shelf we could build that was for purpose. Everybody was trying to make their money off the hardware, and it was like expensive and not open. So we ended up building a hub, and then we thought, there surely will be a bunch of devices that will want to integrate with us right away. But of course, ended up having to build five sensor products, things that are common today, like a smart plug for turning something on and off, a bunch of different types of sensors so that you could put basic applications together, and then to sort of stimulate the world. So that we sold these Kickstarter kits, which were, for if you're a homeowner, you can buy these things and make your home smart. There's motion here, turn on the light over there.
So it was a direct consumer play. It was like a multi-product approach for consumers to automate different parts of.
Yeah, and then a developer toolkit, which it came with a hub, but then a thing shield, we called it. It was like a custom Arduino shield, they call them, that you can put on top of an Arduino and get whatever sensors and stuff you wanted to do. So we had this nice combo of kind of regular geeky homeowners, buying it, and then we had thousands of developers that signed up to like hack on the platform, and that was that. We were open from the beginning in that sense. And of course, that has a lot of challenges with it, but it also made our kind of the spirit come alive for the platform.
And so, this obviously turns into a huge success. You get acquired, you go to Samsung. Why do you decide to leave and do something that, at least from the outside, seems like very similar, or at least like in the same space? Like, what was kind of like left maybe unfulfilled that pulled you back in?
I think, as you get older, for me anyway, I love building, creating, products and companies and teams, but you also like out for impact too. And there was this experience like during Smart Things, we ended up, I think of it as it's a great platform, great outcome, love the team that keep building it, but we were sort of trapped in the smart home space. And it felt like, there's this moment, it was funny, but my wife came down in the middle of the night, and I had a smart app for lighting. I was always experimenting with crap in our house, and she came down in underwear, and like all the outside lights, and turned on, like a party mode, and he was like on display. Even though there's that movie, The Watcher, like this year, there's like a horror film where one way mirrored glass, and you're like being watched from the outside. She sort of pictured herself this way, even though nobody is watching. But she's like, this is stupid. Like, who needs smart lighting? No one, And I was like, well, some people really like it, et cetera. But that's like emblematic of it. Sort of struck me of like, are these smart home applications really life or death? A few of them are, right? But a lot of the things are.
It's so funny. It's so funny you say that. Like literally the last podcast that I recorded, similar. And it's funny how you need sometimes people from the outside, whether it's a partner or a friend, that are just like not so deep in, to just kind of pull you out and be like, are you sure this is it, right? In this case, a company called Infinitus, and born out of, you remember like 2018, there was like that first voice AI example from Google where you could reserve like something like at a spa, right? Like it would automatically call a restaurant or a spa for you. And it was similar. Somebody from this team, kind of his wife was like, that, like, you have that tech, and what you're going to do is help people book like restaurants without having to call. Really? Like, I'm in healthcare, like there's a lot of things. And so anyways, he ended up building this like voice AI for healthcare. Infinitus went on to raise $100 million plus, but kind of, more in a similar vein, which is like somebody pulling you out and maybe helping you see a little bit, I don't know if it's a bigger picture, or at least like from a non-hyper tech person's perspective, like maybe more to the real world, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like, and we did in the platform for Smart Things, we saw people struggle to do stuff that were in the home that were more meaningful problems, and then some outside. But, I was always struck, there's this moment where, like in the developer platform, like somebody had built like a group of parents with quadriplegic kids had built like a set of smart apps to help their kids control stuff in the house more. And you're like, okay, that's meaningful. That's like a niche, but it's super meaningful. And, we had this yearning for bigger problem sets. And so somewhere along the line, sort of that unfulfilled physical graph more broadly, Smart Things, sort of companies grow a life of their own, and they get into a dynamic with investors and customers and other things where they occupy a space. And if they're successful, they can dominate a space. But it was clear that Smart Things had its identity, and there was a lot of unfulfilled challenge in the world. And so, somewhere along there, Bright didn't start as focused as it is now, but similar, there's a whole journey there of just saying we know it's not in the home. Like a lot of these critical problems, things that Western civilization relies on, they are outside the home. Even if you're relying on them inside, and there's a whole journey there that, so left, retired from Smart Things in 2018, started Bright in 2019, and we're definitely one of those like overnight success stories now that we're coming out of stealth that sort of had its big buildup. But it really does go back to, just following your nose as down the rabbit hole with even a space you don't have experience with. Like that was the Smart Things origin, and this bigger picture, which is, I think, this opportunity to make the world go from sort of deaf, dumb, and blind to, sort of awakened in a sense, and all the positive and negative implications of that, but where you can bring intelligence into these physical spaces. And in the case of Bright, all the critical infrastructure that Western civilization relies on. But that's how it sort of emerged.
And I know you've gone on, and like you said, you came out of stealth now. You've done like $100 million in revenue with no funding, which is absolutely incredible. But taking you back to that like early time, you said it was kind of a journey to figure out, the real use cases. What are the specifics there? Like when you leave in 2019, what do you do first?
We it was a while was this with the close network of co-founders sort of thinking about what are the modern technologies that, if we were doing something like this again, what would we build it on, et cetera. And then it was like, I'm a big believer that you take venture dollars once you know what the pattern really is. And there was a sense that I knew it was going to be these critical services, but I didn't know the structure of how those are even run. Like I wasn't a guy that was from like power distribution grid or the water supply or like these critical, like these things. I just knew about these underlying technologies. So in the beginning, we just went out and talked to people. Really, it sounds crazy, but in my case, looked at like, okay, who services critical infrastructure, and it was often found this niche in private equity channels. I'd never done anything related to private equity. It just went venture backed, bootstrapped, all the way to exited to public companies that were post private equity. I had no idea about it, but it's this incredible part of the capital chain that privately owns massive entities that are things that you rely on every day that you've never heard of before. So it turns out a lot of the critical infrastructure is serviced by private equity owned enterprises. So
Like even you're talking about like electricity, water, like utilities.
yeah. Like, so, I mean, an example of a customer now would be Azuria, is a great customer and partner of BrightAI. They are a company you've never heard of, but you're certainly a customer of, like all of the water pipelines for fresh water and sewage, like across the US. Azuria, when those water pipelines need maintenance or inspection, which happens a lot, they're owned by the municipalities, but the service company that actually services all those, Azuria, is the market leader in doing that. And can talk all day about how that works, which is so fun to learn about these industries that I had no idea about. But, they are out there and they're owned by a private equity sponsor. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. They do 60% of the water pipeline rehabilitation in the country, and you've never heard of them, and they do something super essential for all of us. So I went to and found some of these companies and found forward-leaning management teams where I was like, look, I have, you're not a technology company in the way that I think about it. They'll call themselves a technology company, but I mean, in terms of a modern tech platform company. And a really interesting thing that's happening now is like, why is the world accelerating? Well, it's like, it's not just one piece of the tech stack. There's no you can't go to them with it's a mobile app. It's like IoT and robotics and cloud and.
But did you go with them with that kind of an idea, or were you very open about, hey, I just want to do something in IoT. Tell me about your world, your problems. Do you know what I mean?
IoT, it was very clear to me that the reason the world is accelerating in technology is the stacking of these multiple tech layers together. So I was I'd always been passionate about AI back to school and other things. And it was clear that the age of AI was coming, and we can chat more about that. And so we had this thesis about, you can unlock a real-time view of the world that makes you go from reactive, kind of the way the Romans managed infrastructure, and we could go into that, and that's kind of still the case today, to this post-Roman Empire way of managing infrastructure. It's time. So we had that idea, but we didn't know what would that mean for water pipelines, because I had no idea about water pipelines. So what does that mean about pest control? I had no idea about pest control. So we would collaborate with the C-level of these companies and their ownership and say we have the capability to build next gen, this post-Roman era, solution. And about your industry, let's have a baby, basically.
You think, by the way, just to interrupt you, do you think you could have done this without your background? Does it, sometimes I think, your first business has to be something not simple, but where the value prop is just kind of right there. But for your second or third one, you can go after these bigger ideas. You think that's true?
I do. I think you can get lucky, early on, and then you aggregate if you're good at surrounding yourself with the people that then can take you into the space, more complex space. But for me, it definitely took me a while to recognize what types of problems are worth solving. What makes a good business. What makes a good team, and then how the world can just beat the crap out of you. If you're naive about certain things, and so I had really experienced failure too. I mean, there was times when smart things days where, people start to depend on it. And we'd have days where we would add, I'm not kidding, more devices would join the network in that day than the history of the company in the 2 years before, where you'd just be we were oh my God, and then there's times where it was slowing down and it was it kind of going down on its own weight, and we didn't know the way out. And it was I certainly lost a lot of biological years of my life, solving those problems, but you do get sort of hardened by the world. And I think what we're solving is an actual really hard problem.
And there's also a credibility piece, getting into the room. I can't imagine, getting into that room with the C-level and getting the time and attention that, that they're giving you.
Yeah, it was definitely built on faith the first time. It's trust, I can do this. Let's pair up. And, the model was, we didn't have the pattern figured out yet, but it was basically, we'll conceive of this thing together. You will have this you'll have the advantage in your particular industry, and we will see what the common building blocks are on the other side of it, and we can apply those to other industries. Also, importantly, it's not we're just going to toss this over the fence to you because you wouldn't know what to do with it. We will operate this for you on an ongoing basis. It's going to be a platform, and you need that, and here's why. And so that's the sort of bootstrap model. It's partnering with big companies that believe in you, believe in the space you're trying to solve, you have to sacrifice some market advantage or IP or some other things in different cases to sort of navigate through that well. But the flip side is you have product market fit, and coming out of that, it doesn't mean it's a good business model or a good platform yet, but you know what you're talking to customers. You're not just building it for its own sake. Like you see it front and center, like, okay, here's the solution that will solve the problems in this particular industry. So for us, then the big challenge is abstracting that to, okay, how do we build it as a repeatable pattern? And that's its own whole journey. But
well, and even maybe before that, like I'd love to go deep on at least just one of these, like which company was one of the first to be like, yeah, you know what, let's do something together. And then what was the use case and how do you figure it out? And how do you kind of work your way towards a product? Like just going really deep on that, I think would be super helpful.
A good example might be, each of these are pretty good. But as we get to the platform at some point, I'll tell you, there's different facets of types of solutions that we see and so on too. But pest control is a pretty good example of this. I suppose it's an industry that everybody can understand, but especially during the pandemic, it became really important that, like, say a food distribution warehouse doesn't have, pest vectors, disease vectors coming into it. Like we all got sensitized to that. Everybody had their own personal journey around COVID, but that's one thing that moved up in the world's like consciousness. So there we went out, we had a private equity based company called Pelsis that I'd never heard of before. Again, that's sort of largest distributor of pest control products in the world. Met with their leadership team, talked about our capability set, and ultimately landed on an initial product that we would build together, kind of hand in hand. And that was sound really idiosyncratic, but it's a connected insect, like AI insect light trap. So you've been in these things get really specific, but we hatched this idea for a product with them, and
I love that. So yeah, how does that work? And I know nothing about pest control, or like where does this light go? Like what does it do?
A warehouse or a restaurant where there's like one of those fly lights that like has a blue light or something, and there's a glue board behind it where flying insects get stuck on it. So it turns out, business I knew nothing about, but they were the biggest manufacturer of these products in the world, and it's in the food distribution warehouse, it really matters. Like if a certain type of bug shows up, you shut things down,
interesting.
Right? And
because what, they reproduce, or they're like dangerous, or
yeah, they're the carriers of disease.
I see. Okay.
Now we're doing like all pest types, but this one was like one where, okay, you guys have a right to win, and the problem was they would walk through it like, okay, where do you don't have the labor, or the capital's too costly, or you have a big sustainability problem. These are like three levers we talk about, and they're like, minimum wage workers, it sucks. They go to a food distribution warehouse. They have to climb up a ladder to like pull the glue board off and look at it like once every X weeks, right? And then if there's something there, it's usually already been a problem because
they were pulling it out and like looking the bugs that died and being like, wow, this one here, like danger.
There's a problem. Let me report on that.
Incredible.
And it's usually long after there's already a bigger problem because you didn't see it. You saw it once every 30 days. You didn't see it when it was happening.
Who would have thought, right? Like this is just so, I mean, you said idiosyncratic, but I love it, right? Because it's just like
very
such a, but it's a massive problem.
The answers are in the details. I mean, I would say we're building a general platform, but the value is in the depth. Like this is not surface level. You have to go all the way down to the specific on the ground reality of like, what is actually the problem? And, in this one, so we built, now, hence, we have uses our full platform end to end, but it's equipped with modernized sensors and multimodal AI in this light that you would never think otherwise of, but in real time, it can do AI driven recognition of species and
using like a camera or something else.
Multiple sensors of different types. And because there's another thing about multimodal AI we can dork out on if you want to, but like, often it's not one sensor type that gives you the answer. It's multiple at the same time. That's why we have eyes and ears and feel and touch and smell and, like other stuff. If eyes were good enough, like one eye were good enough, we would have just evolved with one eyeball, but we didn't.
That's true. Although intuitively, and I'm I'm a tech person, but not an engineer by any means. So like quickly I get out of my depth, but you would think to know what type of insect it is, you would just need eyes. But I guess not.
Visual is eye, but it might not be the visual spectrum. As an example, like they may fluoresce different light wavelengths of light differently, where some physically a bug looks exactly the same, but it's not. Or other pest types that are different in terms of smell and sound and other things too. But all these domains. But the point is, so it's a multimodal AI, thing that sits inside this light. It tells the operators these things in real time. how bad their problem is, and they can be much more surgical in what to do about it than real time. It goes from this reactive time-based inspection way the Romans did it to like hyper modernized AI driven. You can predict if the problem's going to be a big one based on how fast bugs are being sort of seen by this thing, and everything changes. So you get this massive labor savings. You don't have the damage from like these infestations, which has a huge capital cost. And of course, you don't have to use the same amount of pesticides and stuff for sustainability, because you're not carpet bombing proactively, because you don't need to most of the time. You just do it like right when you need to, right where you need to, that kind of thing. And that sort of proposition, that's emblematic of both like early customer journey. Like you got to get that all the way built. It was a pain in the booty, and it's there. But then you have the unlock of that. And of course, then there's that pattern, underneath that that has emerged into our platform that, is why we raised the venture finally now. And we do see the pattern that we're launching. But that's sort of a good example of like,
yeah, I think that's a great one. And did it enable also a different revenue stream for the like, because normally you would just sell a light and you're done. Is there now like they have a recurring revenue stream as a result of this AI kind of ID?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, in all these areas of critical infrastructure, it's amazing. It's like, I call it, you can use the word, it's not a zero-sum game, or I like to use the phrase whack-a-mole. I don't know if you know that game from like a carnival where you like whack one thing and another thing out another hole and stuff. Like there's a lot of businesses that are like whack-a-mole, where like if you do something here to like say decrease cost, like the quality of the service goes down. So it's like creates another problem. Otherwise, the beauty of this sort of modern AI plus IoT platform that we're building is it's awesome for everybody. So like for the company that produces it, it goes from one time to a recurring revenue stream. It's like way more profitable in that sense. It's a much higher value to the end customer, which might be a food distribution company a brand that you've heard of or something that produces products you buy every day in the grocery store. For them, it's like they don't have the factory shutdowns. They can verify for insurance and other things that they don't have a problem. They can, do all those things. Of course, for consumers, it's like less parts per million of pests in your food you're eating, and also less toxins, for the whole earth. Everybody wins. So it's like, it's great. And then finally things like fewer truck rolls because you don't go when you don't need to, and all those things that happen. So it's like creates a new revenue stream, but it also has all these other benefits.
That's right. Well, I think it's interesting. Like I find, when I think about this and I put myself in like, imagine you were pitching me this, let's say, right? Or somebody was pitching me this, I'd be like the value prop, super clear, right? Like it's a no-brainer. I would think about, and you mentioned the platform, so I think we can get into that now. Like it just seems so hard to do at scale. Like, okay, yeah, you build one of these lights, got it, right? Like how do you build 100, 1,000, and then how do you move from that to all the other use cases that you probably have in your mind that you want to solve? I guess that's where the platform comes in. But yeah, I would love to learn more about that part of the journey.
It's like that is an entrepreneurial, like just hard learned lesson. Because I'm sure there's many founders that you talk to or that listen to your show that you can end up in a niche like smart things. I was telling you, like I never intended it to be a smart home company even, and it just ended up being like a prison of smart home stuff. If from a negative standpoint, it was like only doing that, and that's where its right to win was. The brand was, consumers aligned, good investors, everything else. Like you have to have a discipline to take a step back and say, I'm not after becoming the pest light company, because if I just went down that niche and blew that out, like the vision was always that there's like a bigger impact in the world to be had. So we were constantly looking from our first few customers of like, what's the commonality, and how do we let go of certain things that can exist outside of Bright and make what is the core of what we're going to do. And there's no, I would say there's a discipline and experience that leads you to that type of thing, but it's, there's no like magic formula for it, but it's like, it's the key to whether you become sort of a one hit wonder or really narrow in a space. To the biggest companies in the world end up being horizontal platforms, like period, in terms of value.
But it's kind of ballsy, right? Because the most natural thing to do would be like, you found a way to deliver some value. Well, just go find more of those things. Go find more pest control companies. Just do it 10 times, 100 times.
Yeah.
But to be like, no, we're going to go out. It's tough at the beginning. Obviously, if you get it right, it's massive. But it is, it's kind of high risk, high reward.
Yeah. So certainly lots of fights, internally about that, because definitely lots of people think exactly like that, because it's what's staring you in the face is like, let's just blow the doors off on that one vertical. And it definitely takes sort of conviction to say like, that's not what we're here to do. Like, yes, we can grow in that branch, but the focus is and the mission, right, is to awaken critical infrastructure broadly. To go to this, from this era of reactive based management of these critical services to a place where we're the ones, guys. Like we are the change we want to see in the world. We're gonna be the ones that usher in this post-Roman era and unlock productivity and sustainability and capital efficiency and all that. So
you think it helped you that you weren't venture backed to be able to make those decisions? Just
for sure, yeah. Like too early, we could have gotten, because often if you take venture too early, you end up in the trap at some level of you got professional investors around the table then, and you have to deliver a nonlinear scale business out of those investment dollars. And if you don't see that pattern early, then the pressure arises to find that space. And it really took some years here. We had to build some projects. We had to have some hiccups. We had to have a few of these under our belt at that level of depth that I was just describing to sort of see the common pattern. So I think that's right. That was that. The difficulty then is in popping out of when you see the chance to accelerate. Often people stay in that bootstrap mode and it all becomes like a pride, we don't need it. We can get there another step. But once you see the pattern, humans aren't that smart. Probably others will too. You better get on it, and magnify it. Once
I think, it's you make a good point, like looking at VC like a tool, the tool that it is, versus, because you have people on both sides. Like one is like, I want to raise VC because I want to be able to say I raised $20 million or $100 million. That's not good. Then you have the other spectrum is like, I never want to touch VC because I don't like them. I want to be bootstrapped. Like, again, not great. Like, if you think of it as a tool, you're like, if I need it, I'll raise it. If I don't, I won't. Like, depending, then I think that's the best balanced approach. And just to add to what you were saying, I think another thing is having too many kind of stakeholders can be negative in the early days, in my opinion, because, you need to have that kind of highly opinionated, say, vision. And frankly, there's so much risk early on, so many unknowns, that if you have too many people almost doubting you, opining on it, I don't know, it can get noisy.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So, you get that time, that quiet moments in your soul as a founder where you can just be like, why am I really here? And what are we doing? And you're not accountable. You're push accountable to your customers and your employees and things, but you're still the steering wheel is yours, totally. So I don't take it lightly from past experiences of when we did do it. So we saw this pattern and, it was time for Bright to do it. But I think that general learning of the goal isn't, you hear this over and over, the goal isn't the round. The just a raise for its own sake is very dangerous and risky from the standpoint of just being good to the other side of the equation too. Like, on the other hand, VCs, the best ones are more than money. They have great experience on the patterns and building great businesses and stuff. So it's like, you got to pick that moment of, I'd say it's like when you really see the pattern, and you can see this repeatability where you should build in advance of customer need, this requisite set of products, because you just know that there's going to be a ton that we need, the specifics of what you're building. Once you have that feeling, then, you'll get a lot of benefit, not just from the capital, but from a great investor that can help you magnify, and pace that out so that you get more of the spoils than you otherwise would have, if you were doing it all on your own. So anyway.
So the other, maybe going back to kind of the main storyline, like the thing I really want to understand is what do you do to make sure you build out a platform? I assume one part of it is making sure you're doing multiple different types of implementations, concurrently. So you're not just pest control. But then if that's the case, how do you not drown, because you've got to worry about so many use cases, products, sensors, how do you just set that up?
It's a tough one. I think that our biggest risk is we've gone through chapters of it's hard to deliver, a diverse set of things like this.
Exactly.
Getting into that, it's going to be hard, but what are you going to do? Because it's true that the learnings come from those multiple spaces. So there's great businesses to be built in specific niches all over the place. And a lot of people, can have a very productive outcome in that regard. For me, life is short and, you only get so many swings at the plate. And why the fuck would you do something small if you can go for it? It's not going to, you might as well, it's what you
100%.
And so it's hard. But there's really no substitute for just being relentless is one of the values, to say in every company I've ever built. It's be curious, be passionate for impact, be empathetic to like all the people that don't have the same things we do in terms of knowledge, skill sets, otherwise, like, and be relentless in like getting it built. So you have to, I think you're right. You asked the question on the platform, like you do have to make sure it's applicable to multitude of spaces that you're sort of imagining it, can go to, and challenge yourself with those implementations. Not in all cases. I mean, I didn't think we have 7 verticals. We have 7 customers, today.
But specifically, like even on that, do you have like different teams, one for each customer? Do you make sure everything you build can be used by everyone? Like what specific things are you doing to make it manageable?
We do. So we've evolved that over time. So we, of course, there's no one organizational design that makes sense. But in our case, we started with just one project. We didn't take on more than one. As we started to have a gut sense on the building blocks, we took on a second and had, the teams that are responsible for those common building blocks kind of separated from the clients, and watched that tension emerge as you had client-specific teams and then the underlying platform team, as the platform doing what it's needed for each client. How do you make sure the client is served well? It doesn't get slowed down because you're trying to genericize this platform underneath. And there was a tug and pull for a couple of years where it was a dystopian nightmare of work. But we got, you get there eventually, and if you keep at it. So that's what we did. Today we're emerging much more where a much higher percentage is now in this centralized platform team, and it looks more like field deployed vertical specific teams that are based on the economics of that vertical. Those should be self-sustaining. Our platform team and the products we're building, we're no longer looking to individual customers to like fund that. That's why you bring in venture dollars. We're building those reusable building blocks. When it comes to the specifics, the application for the customers, mostly we look at those to basically be bootstrapped in a sense. There's been a couple examples where I've had enough conviction we just did it, but hope what I'm saying makes sense. Sense that
it does. And so just to make sure, 7 customers, 100 million in revenue. I mean, these are massive enterprise contracts.
Yeah, they're big. And it speaks to that being like a pretty experienced entrepreneurial team. I'd like to say my our CTO, who's just amazing, Karan Barwani, he was head of all autonomy at Rivian, before this, and head of all autonomy at Caterpillar before that. Huge industrial life or death things. Like, he drives a car every day that he wrote the code for that his children ride in. And it's like, it's real. It's real on the road. That's cool. But it's also like not a toy. It's like life or death, real things. And so we had, similar things and smart things where you have to have a team that's like got that hardcore aspect to it. But that's how you get those larger deals done too. You can go and say like, I know how to do this. You can rely on me. And the outsized value, the positives is that sort of made it so our initial targets couldn't be little mom and pop, localized infrastructure maintenance companies. We had to go after the big ones that have enough earnings and financial power that they can absorb an investment of the size that we're doing. And now the challenge is, how do we make this thing that has this huge value and takes a couple of years to implement for these previous customers? How do we make that available for the 2-person business in a local niche somewhere someday, that they could actually have the benefits of this awakened world in the same way that we've talked about? But we're kind of graduating down where it's like trying to make it more accessible in a sense. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Alex, let's stop it there, and I'll ask you the kind of 2 questions we always end on. The first one is, when did you, and it's interesting actually for this one, like when did you feel like BrightAI had true product market fit?
When we saw in multiple customers in totally different industries the level of value that was emerging from the tool set that we had built, So, we had this, again, in building the platform, we've got this kind of this idea of site and asset visibility, like real-time understanding what's going on in the world at any time. These tools for the human workers you send into the environment, and then like robotics toolkits for autonomous maintenance and operations and inspection and things too. And I think it was when, it's not just one application, when we saw that 2 totally different industries, like, my gosh, you see a customer doubling their labor efficiency, meaning like they can do twice as much work with the same team, doubling capital efficiency, like the things are higher quality, last longer, less waste, et cetera. And then the sustainability goals, it varies in terms of people's mentality about that, but certainly it's high in my mind of like, you could see that it's like using less resources, less truck rolls, less chemicals, less all that. And you're like, you knew it. You're like, if we can do that across 2 totally disparate industries, we're onto something here. And so that's where we're going now. It's like, how do you go from, these 7 to certainly hundreds this year to thousands, in the coming years.
Perfect. And then last question, and I know you've obviously been through a lot of startups, but also you work with a lot of founders. What are some of like the most common pieces of advice that you find yourself giving, especially to like early stage founders?
I mean, there's a bunch over time. So I'll just unscripted give you a few that are up for me. I think to give you an example, for me, calibrating, I feel, not to be mean to previous companies, and I'm certainly not including Smart Things in this because I'd had this realization by then, but don't solve a dumb problem. Like, it may seem easier and more accessible to you, but the best people and the best capital don't want to do it. You might as well colonize Mars, right? It's like in some ways easier than if I told you I grew up on, lake in Minnesota, and, if I was like, with an eyedropper, I want to remove every bit of water out of this lake, one eyedropper at a time. That's totally doable, but it's a like terrible, useless mission. Like nobody would want to get on it. It'd be a huge human effort. But in some ways, it's like easier to go for the massive, meaningful, business. So, really be thoughtful, because a great team, if you're a good team builder, you of course need a great team, but a great team working on a dumb problem is a super dangerous thing, because they can push the boulder up the hill and kind of make it work, but you're just wasting your potential and the potential of the world and everything else. So the importance of the problem really matters. Another one for me, and this is sort of related to that, is sort of time scales. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, a lot of people just don't do it until it's almost too late. You see these there's lots of older founders like me, but they tend to have started founding things earlier. There's a time when you got to get on with it, and you have an inclination to do it or not. But I think that once you get into the learnings of this mantra, it takes 3 to 5 years to build anything great, and you should know in 18 months. And what I mean by that is that you have to give it time. Things don't just flash into existence. It doesn't mean it's over in 3 to 5 years. It just means to build authentic, repeatable, massive value, it takes something like that. What I mean by you should know in 18 months is you should see it. If the pattern is not starting to emerge, you're not getting positive feedback loop from customers and your own gut and everything else, you're probably, instead of chasing that boulder up, you're probably doing the boulder up the hill thing, and that payoff's not there. So it's this combination of being relentless, but also being using your time to focus it on the right problem and switch gears when you need to. So that's a couple of them. There's a bunch. I mean, it's there's no one.
That's perfect. Perfect. Well, Alex, thanks so much for jumping on the show.
All right, Pablo, I really appreciate it. And lots of future conversations I'll look forward to as well. So thank you.
Listen, when you go to a restaurant, you eat a nice, meal, maybe a fancy one, maybe not. Do you leave a tip? I assume you probably leave a tip. You probably leave a tip 100% of the time. Well, guess what? A review is just like a tip. And I know you haven't been leaving one. So just like the waiter that doesn't get a tip after hours of great service, I'm getting a little frustrated. So take your phone out and leave a review. It helps the show move up rankings. It helps us get better guests. It doesn't just help me. It helps way more founders. Thank you.